Before the world learned to write history, there was a city that learned to watch. In this city, nothing truly disappeared. Every movement left a trace. Every silence was observed. Power here did not roar like thunder. It whispered, measured, and waited patiently. This was not merely a city of gods and kings. It was a machine designed to shape human behavior. Here, law came before freedom, order before mercy, obedience before truth. Even the walls carried warnings, etched into stone for those who dared forget. Fear was not accidental here. It was engineered, repeated, and carefully maintained. Above them stood the gods, but below, human eyes watched far more closely. Babylon promised safety, prosperity, and greatness at a price few dared question. But what happens to a society when control becomes more sacred than life itself? Stay with me, because Babylon's greatest power was not its walls, gods, or armies. Babylon functioned like a living system where every citizen played a role assigned by law. Daily life followed invisible rules, shaping behavior long before anyone questioned their existence. From sunrise to nightfall, the city moved with disciplined precision, never truly at rest. But discipline demanded sacrifice, and Babylon rarely asked. It simply took. Homes offered shelter, but never escape, as authority extended quietly into private spaces. Even families lived beneath written codes, where loyalty to law outweighed blood. Rules shaped thought itself, teaching citizens what to fear before teaching them what to believe. Silence became a survival skill, perfected through generations of careful observation. Religion reinforced control, framing obedience as divine order rather than human design. Rituals repeated daily, blending faith with governance until the two became inseparable. People believed they chose obedience, unaware how deeply choice itself had been redesigned. Babylon did not imprison bodies. It shaped minds to police themselves. Stability mattered more than justice, and order outweighed compassion within Babylon's system. Wealth flowed through the city, but never without reinforcing hierarchy and control. Every advantage Babylon offered carried an invisible cost, quietly paid by the obedient. How much freedom can vanish before people stop noticing its absence? Before kings and empires, Babylon perfected something far more enduring than conquest. To understand Babylon's true power, we must step beyond its walls and into its people. Because control was not enforced, it was lived, taught, and inherited daily. Each morning, Babylon awakened not in chaos, but in carefully rehearsed order. Daily movements followed patterns learned since childhood, shaping behavior long before conscious thought formed. Even children absorbed the city's logic early, learning where to stand, speak, and remain silent. Homes provided shelter, but never freedom, as the city's rules followed people indoors. There were no truly private lives here, only smaller stages beneath the same watchful system. Work defined identity, binding individuals tightly to roles the city depended upon. Repetition reinforced obedience, turning routine into habit, and habit into unquestioned loyalty. Markets appeared free and vibrant, yet every exchange unfolded beneath silent supervision. Trade brought wealth, but always within limits carefully enforced by authority. Babylon feared chaos more than cruelty, believing order justified every necessary sacrifice. Meals were simple, calculated for survival rather than comfort, sustaining bodies needed for obedience. Even eating followed rules, reinforcing restraint and awareness from the youngest age. Clothing signaled status, duty, and position, silently communicating one's place within the system. Nothing in Babylon's design was accidental. Every detail reinforced hierarchy and predictability. Over time, citizens stopped questioning rules they could no longer remember choosing. Belief filled the spaces law alone could not reach, anchoring obedience to divine meaning. The gods were present everywhere, woven into routine, ritual, and justification. Rituals required no explanation. Repetition alone made them feel eternal and unquestionable. Faith softened fear, transforming obedience into perceived moral duty. The strongest chains in Babylon were invisible, forged inside belief rather than iron. Every interaction reinforced hierarchy, reminding citizens constantly of their assigned place. Respect was rarely optional. It functioned as another survival skill. Silence was valued as wisdom, protecting those who learned when not to speak. Lessons passed quietly between generations, ensuring continuity without open instruction. Control succeeded best when it felt normal, predictable, and necessary. Babylon rarely needed force. Compliance had already taken root in daily life. The city itself seemed to think, anticipating behavior before actions occurred. Stability justified everything, even when humanity slowly faded beneath its weight. Few noticed what vanished, because nothing disappeared suddenly or violently. But systems built on control eventually face a moment they cannot manage. As Babylon expanded, pressure quietly built beneath its perfect surface, unseen but deeply felt. Rules multiplied, no longer guiding behavior, but defining punishment for every possible mistake. What began as structure slowly hardened into something rigid, unforgiving, and absolute. Fear became precise here, teaching citizens exactly where obedience ended and punishment began. Justice in Babylon was clear, predictable, and terrifyingly unequal. People learned quickly, not through mercy, but through watching what happened to others. Silence thickened across the city, replacing questions with careful glances and restrained breath. Law was no longer written only on stone, but carved into memory and behavior. There was no escaping Babylon's system, because it followed people everywhere they went. Authority concentrated tightly, shrinking distance between decision, judgment, and irreversible consequence. Those who obeyed perfectly were rewarded with stability, status, and temporary safety. Punishment served as instruction, carefully staged to educate the many through the suffering of few. Fear stopped feeling shocking, slowly blending into routine until it felt normal. Eventually, order tipped too far, and stability began eroding from within. Small fractures appeared first, whispered dissatisfaction, hidden behind obedient expressions. Not all citizens carried the system equally. Some bore far heavier burdens than others. Anger existed everywhere, but nowhere could it safely speak aloud. Every system reaches a pressure point where control creates its own undoing. Faith began to tremble as reality contradicted the promises once used to justify obedience. The order Babylon worshipped proved fragile, requiring constant enforcement to survive. As resistance grew, Authority responded not with reflection, but with tighter control. Once this moment passed, Babylon could no longer return to balance. Fear began feeding power directly, strengthening the system even as trust collapsed. Compassion faded quietly, replaced by calculation, caution, and self-preservation. Babylon approached a breaking point few could name, yet everyone could feel. Everything appeared stable, but tension held the city together like strained rope. Soon, Babylon would face a choice between loosening control or tightening it completely. Just before change, silence returned heavier than ever across the city. Babylon chose preservation over people, reinforcing power instead of addressing growing fracture. And in doing so, Babylon revealed the true price of perfect order. Behind Babylon's flawless system lived ordinary humans, carrying fear quietly behind disciplined expressions. The system's weight pressed hardest on those with the fewest choices and weakest protections. Even children learned fear early, absorbing rules before understanding freedom was ever possible. Control succeeded best when it no longer needed enforcement, only inheritance. Most lives followed paths assigned at birth, leaving little space for deviation or dream. Fear followed people home, settling quietly into rooms meant for rest and safety. Even love bowed to law, reshaped by rules stronger than emotion or loyalty. Loss felt normal here because nothing was taken suddenly or violently. Individual identity slowly shrank, replaced by function, duty, and expectation. Decisions affecting lives were made far above, unseen, and rarely questioned. The farther power moved from people, the easier their suffering became invisible. Many learned silence was safer than honesty, and obedience safer than truth. Belief no longer brought comfort, as faith struggled beneath unanswered questions. Doubt spread quietly, careful not to attract attention or punishment. Babylon did not break bodies first, it broke spirits patiently. Survival often required complicity, forcing people to support systems harming others. Over time, moral boundaries blurred, replaced by calculation and fear-based choices. The true cost of order was not visible in stone, but written inside people. Lives were measured by usefulness, not happiness, dignity, or fulfillment. Humanity endured, but thinner, quieter, and increasingly distant from itself. Was this the price civilization always demanded? Or had Babylon gone too far? Most chose obedience, not because they believed, but because resistance felt impossible. Somewhere between safety and control, the human line quietly blurred. Acceptance replaced hope, becoming the system's most effective stabilizer. Babylon stood stable, powerful, and unaware of what it had truly sacrificed. This pattern would echo through future civilizations long after Babylon faded. Few recognized the warning hidden inside Babylon's success. Just before collapse, everything appeared calm, ordered, and under control. Babylon now stood at the edge between legacy and consequence. What Babylon left behind would shape humanity far longer than its walls endured. Babylon eventually faded, but the systems it perfected never truly disappeared. Walls crumble easily. Ideas embedded in behavior survive far longer than stone. Babylon created one of humanity's first written legal systems, fixing behavior permanently into stone. These laws punished citizens differently based on class, wealth, and social position. Justice was predictable, but rarely equal, favoring stability over fairness. Religion reinforced law, presenting obedience as divine order rather than human design. Babylon trained citizens to regulate themselves, reducing the need for constant force. Surveillance did not require technology. Social pressure performed the task efficiently. Order allowed Babylon to grow powerful, wealthy, and stable for centuries. But that same order slowly reduced individuality, creativity, and dissent. Babylon proved civilizations can function efficiently while quietly harming their people. Collapse did not come suddenly. Babylon weakened through rigidity and inflexibility. When systems refuse to adapt, stability eventually becomes their greatest vulnerability. Babylon fell, but its blueprint for governance spread across future empires. Modern cities still echo Babylon's balance between control, security, and obedience. The question Babylon leaves us is unsettling because it remains unanswered today. How much control feels acceptable when safety, comfort, and order are promised? At what point does protection quietly transform into restriction? Babylon reminds us that civilizations rarely collapse from chaos alone. They often fall because order becomes more important than humanity itself. This story survives not because Babylon endured, but because humans remember its lesson. Thank you for staying until the end of this journey through power, fear, and choice. Your presence keeps these stories alive, reminding us why understanding the past still matters. Together, we rebuild history piece by piece, through memory, curiosity, and reflection. This was not just Babylon's story. It was a mirror held carefully toward us. Civilizations end, but the questions they leave behind never truly disappear. What we choose to protect today defines what future generations will inherit. Perhaps Babylon's greatest warning is how easily comfort teaches us to accept control. If Babylon returned today, would we recognize it or welcome it? Thank you for being here and for choosing to remember what history tried to forget.